10 minutes before the wedding, my daughter told me I wouldn't be the one walking her down the aisle. My wife stood behind her like it had already been settled. I remember the weight in my hand, the small white corsage, and how suddenly it didn't belong anywhere. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just stood there long enough to understand that this wasn't a last-minute decision. This had been decided somewhere else sometime earlier, without me. But that moment didn't come out of nowhere. It started in the hallway outside the sanctuary at First Baptist in Plano. Late afternoon light cut through those tall windows, falling across the polished floor. The organ inside was warming up soft at first, then fuller. Guests had already taken their seats. You could hear programs folding quiet conversations, shoes shifting against wood. Emily stood in front of me in her dress. Simple, clean lines. Exactly the kind she used to show me on her phone months back, asking too much like my opinion still mattered. For a second, all I saw was my little girl trying to hold herself together. "Dad," she said, not quite looking at me, "we need to change something." I waited. Weddings come with changes. Timing, entrances, music. I thought it was one of those. Then she looked up. "You're not walking me." She said it evenly, like she had practiced. I blinked once. I don't understand. Behind her, Linda stepped forward just enough to be part of the moment. "Ryan's not comfortable with it," Emily continued. "He thinks it might look off in front of people." Look off. I let that sit for a second. Off how, I asked. Emily shifted her weight slightly. "Just not the image he wants." Linda let out a small breath through her nose. "David, please don't turn this into something. It's a ceremony. She can walk on her own." Then sharper, like she was finishing the thought for both of them. "Don't act like you matter so much here." That one didn't echo. It didn't need to. It landed clean. I looked at Emily again. Not at the dress, not at the bouquet. At her face. Waiting for something to change. It didn't. That's when I noticed the man a few steps behind them. Mid-60s maybe. Suit-pressed posture, straight hands folded like he'd been standing there for a while. He didn't look confused. He looked ready. Like he knew his part. No one introduced him. No one explained. They didn't have to. I glanced down at the corsage in my hand. White roses, small and neat. I had stopped by a shop on Parker Road that morning. The woman there had wrapped it carefully and asked, "Big day?" I told her yes. "First wedding." She smiled like it meant something. I cleared my throat. "Okay," I said. That was it. No lecture, no questions. Emily nodded quick, almost relieved. Linda stepped back satisfied like a problem had been handled. I didn't look at either of them again as I turned toward the side exit. The organ swelled as I pushed the door open and stepped outside. The sound cut off behind me the moment it closed. The heat hit right away. Texas doesn't ease you into it, it just reminds you where you are. My truck had been sitting in the sun for hours. When I opened the door, the air inside felt thick, trapped. I rested my hand on the steering wheel and pulled it back quickly. It was almost too hot to hold. I got in anyway. Sat there with the door half open, letting some of the heat escape, watching people cross the lot toward the church entrance. Dressed up, smiling, carrying gifts. Everything looked exactly the way it should. Except for one thing. I closed the door and leaned back in the seat. For a moment, I just watched my own reflection faintly in the windshield. Same face. Same man who had paid deposits, signed checks, taken calls, made sure things got done. Just not the man they wanted walking that aisle. I reached over and turned on the radio. Static first, then a familiar melody came through, an old country song I used to hum when Emily was small. Early mornings driving her to school before traffic picked up. She'd fall asleep with her head against the window, trusting I'd get her where she needed to go. I listened for a few seconds. Then I turned it off. The quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was clear. My hand moved to the inside pocket of my jacket. The folder was still there. Not something I had planned to use today. Just something I'd been carrying the way a man carries things he might need later. I sat up, adjusted the mirror slightly, and looked straight ahead. Through the windshield, I could see the church doors opening and closing as more guests filed in. The world hadn't stopped. It rarely does. I nodded once more to myself than anything. "All right," I said quietly. "I understand." Then I picked up my phone and scrolled to a name I hadn't needed in a while. I didn't call my lawyer right away. That may surprise you. A man gets humiliated 10 minutes before his daughter's wedding, and people expect him to react like a movie character. Kick the door open, make a speech, point a finger, burn everything down in front of the guests. But I'm 58 years old. I've buried a wife, raised a child, built a business from nothing but a used service van, a box of tools, and a back that hurt every winter after I turned 45. I learned a long time ago that the loudest man in the room usually isn't the one with control. So I sat in that hot truck outside the church and let the ceremony happen without me. And while I sat there, I didn't think first about money. I didn't think about the house or the trust or the checks I'd written. I thought about Emily at 18. Move-in day at the University of North Texas in Denton. August heat so thick it made your shirt stick to your spine. We had her whole life packed into the back of my Silverado plastic bins, a mini fridge, a box fan, a laundry basket full of towels Linda had insisted were too cheap looking, though Emily liked them fine. Back then, Linda and I had only been married about a year. Emily's mother, Carol, had been gone for 3. Cancer. Fast and mean. The kind that doesn't negotiate. Emily was trying hard to be brave that morning. She kept saying, "Dad, I'm good. Seriously. You don't have to make a big thing." Then she cried in the dorm parking lot anyway. I remember she laughed through it and wiped her face with the back of her hand. "I'm not crying because I'm scared," she said. I said, "Sure you're not." She punched my arm and we both laughed. Then we ate burgers in the truck because the campus dining hall was packed, and she told me she wanted to study marketing because she liked understanding why people bought things they didn't need. "That's dangerous knowledge," I told her. She grinned. "Then I'll use it responsibly." That was my girl. For years we were close in a way that didn't need a lot of explaining. We weren't the family that said emotional things every 5 minutes. We showed up. That was our language. When her car broke down in Abilene during a summer internship, I drove 4 hours with a toolbox and a cooler full of bottled water. When she got the flu her junior year, I brought soup and sat in her apartment while she slept on the couch. When she graduated, I clapped so hard my palms hurt. And when she got engaged to Ryan McAllister, I tried to be happy. Ryan was 34, clean cut, worked in corporate sales for a medical software company out of Dallas. Good teeth, expensive watch, the kind of man who shook your hand while already deciding whether you were useful. The first time I met him was at a steakhouse in Frisco. Emily had made a reservation because she said Ryan liked nice places. I wore a button-down shirt Linda picked out, though I would have been more comfortable in a polo. Ryan stood when I arrived, gave me a firm handshake and said, "So you're in HVAC." I said. "Sold most of the company last year. Still consult a little." He smiled in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "That's honest work." There it was. Not an insult exactly. Just polished enough to pass as a compliment if anyone challenged him. Emily didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she did and chose not to. Linda, though. Linda loved him from the beginning. She liked how he dressed, how he talked, how he knew which wine to order without asking the waiter. Linda had always wanted life to look a little shinier than it was. She used to tell me, "David, you're a good man, but you don't understand presentation." Maybe she was right. I understood invoices, payroll, health insurance for employees, making sure widows didn't get overcharged when their air conditioner died in July. I understood waking up at 5 and coming home smelling like attic insulation. Presentation wasn't my strongest skill, but I understood loyalty. At least I thought I did. Wedding planning started about 10 months after Ryan proposed. At first, Emily called me about everything: venue options, guest list, whether a plated dinner was worth the extra cost. She'd say, "Dad, this is ridiculous. Why does everything cost more when you add the word wedding?" I'd laugh and say, "Because people know fathers are emotional and easy to rob." She used to laugh at that. Then Linda got involved. "Honey," she told me one evening at our kitchen island, sliding a folder toward herself, "just let me handle the money. You hate paperwork anyway." "I don't hate paperwork," I said. "I ran a business for 30 years. She waved that off. "You know what I mean. Let Emily enjoy this without feeling like every receipt needs your approval." That sounded reasonable at the time. That's the thing about being pushed out. It rarely happens all at once. It happens politely. One small decision, one missed call, one we already handled it. Soon I wasn't visiting venues. I was just writing checks. A deposit for the church reception hall, a photographer from Austin, catering, flowers, a honeymoon package Emily said they might change later. Then came the big one, the house. They called it a starter home, though nothing about it looked starter to me. 4 bedrooms in McKinney, updated kitchen, media room, small backyard with a stone patio. Ryan said renting was throwing money away. Linda agreed. Emily looked at me with those same eyes she had at 18 and said, "Dad, it would help us start right." So I helped. By the time everything was counted, I had put in roughly $185,000 between wedding costs, deposits, and funds tied to that house arrangement. Some of it came from my personal account, some through an account connected to my old HVAC company, which was still being settled after the sale. The house itself was tied into a joint family trust Linda and I had set up years earlier. My attorney had insisted on structure because I had assets from before the marriage, and because Emily was my only child. I contributed about 70% of the value tied to that trust. Linda used to tease me for keeping every receipt. "You and your little folders," she'd say. I always smiled and let it pass. But I kept them. The worst part wasn't even the money. It was how quickly I became background noise. Emily and Ryan picked the menu without me. Then the music. Then the seating chart. When I asked about father-daughter dance songs, Emily said, "We're still thinking." Later, I found out there wouldn't be one. I should have spoken up then. Maybe that's on me. But when you love your child, you explain away more than you should. You tell yourself she's busy. Weddings are stressful. Young people get overwhelmed. You don't want to be needy. You don't want to become one more problem. Then 3 weeks before the wedding, I walked into the garage and heard Ryan's voice through the half-open kitchen door. "We don't need him anymore," he said. "He's done his part." No one laughed. No one corrected him. And that was when I first started carrying copies of my papers. I didn't call Mark right away. I drove. No destination, no rush. Just the road in front of me and enough space to think without anyone else's voice in it. I turned out of the church parking lot and eased onto Parker Road, blending into traffic like any other car leaving a weekend service. No one looked twice. No one knew anything had shifted. That was fine. A few lights later, I passed the turn that would have taken me home. I kept going. Then I merged onto US 75 heading north. The highway opened up, long stretches of concrete, late-day sun, reflecting off windshields the steady rhythm of tires on the road. I'd driven that route more times than I could count: service calls, supply runs, jobs that couldn't wait. Fixing things. That used to be simple. About 20 minutes in, I took an exit without planning it and ended up near a small park in McKinney. Nothing special. A pond, a couple of walking paths, a playground with chip paint, and a bench I recognized before I even realized why. I parked under a tree and cut the engine. That bench, Emily used to call it our spot. She was 9 the first time we came out here. Brought half a loaf of bread she wasn't supposed to take, insisted the ducks needed it more than we did. She talked the whole time about school, about a kid who cheated at tag, about how she was going to be in charge of things when she grew up. "You already are," I told her. She believed me. I sat there now, hands resting on the steering wheel, looking at that same patch of ground. The bench hadn't changed. The trees hadn't either. Just the people. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. Then again, I glanced down missed calls, messages from numbers I recognized. People from the wedding, no doubt. I let it sit. After a minute, I picked it up and scrolled to Emily's name. My thumb hovered over it. I could still call. Ask her to step outside. Ask her to explain it again, slower this time. Tell her she didn't have to go through with anything that felt wrong. I pictured her face in that hallway. Not confused, not pressured. Certain. I locked the phone and set it back down. Not today. I leaned forward slightly, elbows on the wheel, and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "All right," I said under my breath. "You made your call." It didn't sound angry. It sounded settled. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the folder. Plain manila, nothing dramatic about it. Inside were copies, transfers, account summaries, trust documents, the kind of paperwork most people avoid until they have to deal with it. I'd never minded it. Paper tells the truth when people don't. I flipped through a few pages, not reading line by line, just reminding myself what was there, what had been done, what still had my name attached to it. This wasn't something I'd thrown together in a moment of emotion. It had been built over time, structured carefully, at the advice of someone who knew how these things played out. My phone buzzed again. This time I answered. Mark, you okay? He asked. No small talk, just the question that mattered. I'm standing, I said. That's about it. He didn't push. Where are you? McKinney, park off El Dorado. A brief pause. I could hear him shifting, maybe turning away from something on his end. You still at the wedding? He asked. No. Another pause, shorter this time. What happened? I told him. Not every word, not every detail, just the outline, the hallway, the decision, the way it was presented like it had already been handled. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, there was a moment where neither of us spoke. Then he said, calm and steady, all right, we're not reacting to this. We're going to handle it. I'm not trying to start something, I said. I know, he replied. That's why we do this clean. I leaned back in the seat, eyes on the pond. I'm not looking to hurt her, I said. You understand that? I do, he said. But you're not going to ignore what this means either. I let that sit. Walk me through it, I said. Simple version, he replied. You've put a significant amount of money into this wedding and into that property they're planning to use after the honeymoon. Yeah. Was all of it formally documented as a gift? No, I said, some of it, not all. Good, he said. I almost smiled at that. You're the only guy I know who says good to that. It means you still have options, he said. Funds that weren't clearly gifted can be reviewed, especially if they move through accounts tied to your business. I nodded slowly. And the house? That's tied to the trust, he said. You're the majority contributor. That gives you control over how and when things finalize. So we can stop it. We can pause it, he corrected. Slow it down. Force a proper review. I ran a hand along the back of my neck. Mark, she's still my daughter. I know, he said, but right now she's not treating you like one. That one landed quiet. I looked back at the bench, then out across the water. I'm not going after them, I said. I'm stepping back, and I'm taking my part with me. That's a clean position, he said, and it holds. I nodded once. How long? I asked. Give me a couple of hours, he said. I took a breath and let it out slow. All right. David, he added. Yeah, he. You ready for what this does? I thought about the hallway, the words, the man waiting to take my place. I didn't start anything, I said. I'm just not ignoring it anymore. There was a short pause. Then he said, I'll call you back. The line went quiet. I set the phone down, sat there another minute, then reached for the ignition. This time I knew exactly what I was doing. I didn't go back to the church. By the time I started the truck again, the ceremony was already underway. Somewhere inside that building, my daughter was walking down an aisle without me. People were standing. Music was playing. Cameras were recording a moment that for most fathers only comes once. I pulled out of the park and drove without rushing. No sudden turns, no hard brakes, just steady. About 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Filed. I didn't respond. Another one came through a minute later. Accounts flagged. Temporary holds in place. I exhaled slowly, not realizing I'd been holding my breath. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't angry either. It felt more like tightening a loose bolt, something that should have been done earlier, now finally being addressed. I stopped at a red light near a strip mall nail salon, dry cleaner, a diner I'd been to a dozen times. A couple crossed the street holding hands. They looked happy in a quiet, uncomplicated way. My phone buzzed again. Property transfer paused. Title review initiated. That one mattered. The house in McKinney, the one they kept calling their fresh start, wasn't fully theirs. Not yet. The paperwork hadn't cleared completely, and a large portion of the funding still traced back to me. That wasn't an accident. That was structure. I turned into the diner parking lot and killed the engine. The sun was dipping lower now, shadows stretching long across the pavement. Inside, it smelled like coffee and grilled onions. Familiar. Safe. I took a booth by the window. The waitress, a woman probably in her late 50s with a name tag that read, Carol, came over with a coffee pot. Just you, she asked. Yeah, nah. She poured without asking what I wanted. People who've been doing a job long enough can read a situation. You want anything to eat? I shook my head. Maybe later. She gave me a small nod and walked away. I wrapped my hands around the coffee mug more for something to hold than anything else. It was too hot to drink, but I didn't mind. Across the table, a couple sat in silence, both looking at their phones. No conversation, no eye contact. Just presence without connection. I wondered when that had happened in my own house. Another buzz. I checked the phone. You'll likely get calls tonight. Don't engage emotionally. Let me handle anything legal. Mark. I typed back. Understood. I set the phone down and finally took a sip of the coffee. Bitter, strong, exactly what I needed. For a moment, I thought about the ceremony again. Emily standing at the front. Ryan beside her, probably adjusting his cufflinks, making sure everything looked right. Linda in the front row, smiling like she'd orchestrated something successful. And somewhere in that room, empty space where I should have been. I didn't feel the urge to go back. That surprised me. Instead, I pulled my phone out again and opened the live stream Emily had shared with family earlier in the week. It was still running. The camera angle was fixed near the back of the church. You could see the altar, the rows of guests, the soft glow of lights against white flowers. Emily was already there standing beside Ryan. She had walked alone. No one was beside her, no replacement, just empty space. For a second, I didn't understand. Then I remembered the man in the hallway, the one waiting. Maybe something changed. Maybe she decided at the last minute. Or maybe Ryan didn't want anyone at all. Either way, she was standing there by herself. The officiant was speaking. Marriage is not just a union of two people, but a commitment witnessed by family and community. I almost laughed at that. The camera shifted slightly and I caught a glimpse of Linda in the front row. She was smiling, but it looked tight, controlled, like she was aware of eyes on her. Good. Not satisfaction, just acknowledgement. The officiant continued, voice steady, practiced. Ryan said his vows first. Confident, smooth, the kind of man who's comfortable speaking in front of people. Then Emily. Her voice wavered at the start just slightly. Most people wouldn't notice. I did. She glanced out at the crowd once, just once. I don't know what she was looking for. Maybe nothing. Maybe something she already knew wasn't there. I watched for another minute, then closed the app. That part wasn't mine anymore. My phone buzzed again, this time with a call. Linda. I let it ring. It stopped, then started again. I picked it up on the third ring. What is going on, she demanded before I could say anything. No greeting, no hesitation. Evening, Linda, I said. Don't do that, she snapped. Don't act calm like this isn't insane. Mark Benson just contacted me. Accounts are frozen. What did you do? I didn't do anything sudden, I said. I made adjustments. Adjustments, she repeated, voice rising. On our daughter's wedding day. Our daughter's wedding day, I said slowly, was the moment I was told I don't matter. There was a pause. That's not what she started. That's exactly what was said, I cut in, not raising my voice. You were there. She exhaled sharply. David, you're overreacting. This is embarrassing. People are going to hear about this. People already have, I said. They just don't know the details yet. Another pause, shorter this time. You need to fix this, she said, tone shifting. Less anger, more urgency. I am, I replied. By freezing everything. By putting things back where they belong. You're hurting Emily, she said. I looked down at the coffee in front of me. I'm correcting a mistake, I said. Silence stretched on the line. Then quieter, almost uncertain, she asked, what did you expect, that she'd just do everything your way? No, I said. I expected respect. Linda didn't respond right away. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its edge. This isn't over. I know, I said. That's the point. I ended the call before she could say anything else. A few minutes later, Mark texted again. They've been notified formally. I'll be at the house tonight. I read it once, then set the phone face down on the table. Outside, the sky was starting to turn that soft orange you only get for a few minutes before dusk. I finished my coffee, left cash on the table, and stood up. As I walked out to my truck, I realized something I hadn't felt all day. Not anger. Not even relief. Just space. I didn't go to the house that night. That was a choice. Part of me wanted to be there, not to argue, not to raise my voice, just to stand in the doorway and look them in the eye while everything unfolded. Let them see that I wasn't angry, just finished. But I knew myself well enough to stay away. Some things are cleaner when handled at a distance. Around 7:30, my phone buzzed. Mark. I stepped outside my truck, parked along the curb a few blocks from my house, and answered. They're here, he said. I could hear faint movement in the background voices, a door closing, something set down on a hard surface. Walk me through it, I said. I'm at the kitchen table, he replied. I've got the documents laid out. Notary's here. They just came in. I leaned against the side of the truck, looking out at a quiet row of houses. Porch lights were starting to flick on. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once and stopped. Who's talking? I asked. Linda, he said. Mostly. That sounded right. What is this? I heard her voice faintly through the phone, sharp and strained. Not the controlled tone she used in public. This one had cracks in it. Mark didn't raise his voice. He never did. Evening, Linda. I'm here on David's behalf. These documents outline a temporary hold and review of certain financial contributions and property interests. On his behalf, she shot back. Where is he? David asked me to handle this, Mark said. There was a beat of silence, then Emily's voice came through softer but tight. Mom, what's he talking about? I closed my eyes for a second. Mark continued steady. Funds that were contributed toward the wedding and the McKinney property are being formally reviewed. Until that process is complete, access to certain accounts has been limited. That's ridiculous, Linda said. That money was given. Some of it was, Mark replied. Some of it was not formally documented as a gift. Another voice cut in, Ryan. Hold on, he said, controlled but edged. You're saying we can't access our own money right now? I'm saying the funds are under review, Mark answered. That's correct. There was a shuffle like someone pacing. This is insane, Ryan said. We just got married. We have plans. We have a house. The property is part of a trust structure, Mark said, cutting in just enough to keep control. The transfer is not finalized. A title review has been initiated. Silence again, longer this time. I could almost feel the shift in the room through the phone. The moment when frustration starts turning into something else. Understanding. Emily spoke next. He wouldn't do this, she said, but there was doubt in it now. Not today. I took a breath and pushed off the truck. Put me on, I said. There was a brief pause, then the sound of the phone changing hands. David, Emily's voice came through closer now. I'm here, I said. What is this, she asked. What are you doing? I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't have one, but because I wanted to say it clean. No, I said finally. I did this the moment you told me I didn't matter. On the other end, I heard her inhale sharp. Dad, this is my wedding day, she said. You're really doing this now. I'm not adding anything new, I replied. I'm just stepping back from what was never fully yours to begin with. That's not fair, she said, voice rising. You gave that to us. I supported you, I said. There's a difference. Linda jumped back in louder now. This is punishment. That's what this is. No, I said, keeping my voice even. If it were punishment, it would look very different. This is correction. Ryan's voice cut through again, sharper. Look, we can fix this, he said. Whatever this is, miscommunication paperwork, we can sort it out. Just lift the hold and you'll what I asked. He stopped. We'll move forward, he said after a second, like we planned. I let that sit there. That's the problem, I said. The plan didn't include me. Not as a father, not as anything else. That's not true, Emily said quickly, but it sounded weaker now. You had a man ready to take my place, I said. Don't tell me I was part of the plan. Silence. Not denial, just silence. In the background, I heard a chair scrape. Maybe someone sitting down. Maybe someone realizing they needed to. Emily spoke again, quieter this time. I thought you'd always be there, she said. There it was. The thing she hadn't said in the hallway. I answered. You just stopped seeing me. No one spoke after that. I could hear breathing, movement, the kind of small sounds people make when they don't know what to say next. Mark's voice came back in gentle but firm. These are temporary measures. We can discuss resolution once everything is reviewed. Tonight isn't about decisions, it's about notice. Linda muttered something under her breath. Ryan didn't speak again. Emily didn't either. I pulled the phone away from my ear for a second and looked up at the sky. The last of the light was fading now, replaced by that deep blue that comes right before full dark. Mark, I said, bringing the phone back. That's enough for tonight. Understood, he replied. I hesitated for half a second, then added, thank you. He didn't answer with anything dramatic. Just, I'll follow up in the morning. The line went quiet. I stood there for another minute, phone still in my hand, listening to nothing. Then I got back into my truck, started the engine, and drove. 6 weeks passed before things settled into something that resembled quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels peaceful, more like the kind that comes after a storm when you're still checking the damage, still noticing what's missing. Mark handled most of it. There were calls, emails, meetings I didn't attend in person. He walked me through everything in plain language the way he always had. No drama, no legal theatrics, just facts. We confirmed what I already suspected. A portion of the money I'd put toward the wedding had been transferred in formally verbal agreements, no documentation. That part was gone. I accepted that. The rest wasn't. Funds that had moved through my business account were easier to trace. The trust structure gave me leverage on the house. In the end, after negotiations and a fair amount of back and forth, I recovered roughly 2/3 of what I'd put in. I didn't push for more. I could have. Mark said as much. You have the position to press harder, he told me over the phone one afternoon. I know, I said. I'm not trying to win. What are you trying to do? I thought about that for a second. Finish it, I said. And that's what we did. Linda moved out within a week of the initial notice. No big scene, no shouting matches. She packed her things, took what she considered hers, and left. We didn't discuss reconciliation, not once. There wasn't anything left to rebuild. Emily didn't call. Not right away. At first I told myself she needed time. Then I told myself it didn't matter. Both were probably true. Life has a way of filling in the empty spaces, whether you're ready or not. I sold the house in Plano 2 weeks after everything was finalized. It was too big anyway. Too many rooms holding versions of a life that didn't exist anymore. I moved into a smaller place near Lake Ray Hubbard. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, a back porch that caught the breeze in the evenings, and a view of the water if you stood at the right angle. I started playing golf again. Nothing serious. Just early mornings, a few guys my age, the kind of conversations that don't require much explaining. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we didn't. That suited me fine. It was a Thursday morning when Emily finally called. I was sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the light come up over the lake. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. I looked down, saw her name, and let it ring once. Then I answered. Hey, I said. There was a pause on the other end. I could hear her breathing like she wasn't sure how to start. Hi, Dad. Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. How are you? I asked. Another pause. I've been better. I nodded to myself. Yeah. We sat in that silence for a moment, neither of us rushing to fill it. Can we talk? She asked finally. We are talking? I mean, in person. I looked out at the water. A couple of birds skimmed across the surface, leaving small ripples behind them. All right, I said. Pick a place. We met the next day at a small coffee shop in Rockwall. Mid-morning, not too busy. Neutral ground. She was already there when I walked in, sitting at a table by the window. No wedding ring on her hand. I noticed that right away. She stood when she saw me like she wasn't sure whether to hug me or not. In the end, she didn't. Hi, she said again. Hi. I sat across from her, ordered coffee, black. For a minute, we talked about nothing. The drive, the weather, safe topics. Then she stopped. I was stupid, she said, looking down at her hands. I watched her for a second. The way her fingers twisted together, the way she avoided eye contact. No, I said, you weren't stupid. She looked up, hopeful for a split second. You were ungrateful, I continued. There's a difference. It wasn't said harshly, just plainly. She nodded slow, like she already knew. I thought. She started, then stopped. Tried again. I thought everything would just work out, that you'd understand, that you'd always be there no matter what. I was there, I said. That wasn't the problem. She swallowed. I know that now. We didn't fix everything that day. There was no apology big enough to erase what happened in that hallway. No conversation that could rewind 10 minutes and give me back that walk. But we talked. Really talked. About Ryan, about the pressure she felt, about how easy it was to let someone else set the tone for your life if you weren't careful. They weren't together anymore. That didn't surprise me. What happens now? She asked at one point. I took a sip of my coffee. Now, I said, we move forward, carefully. She nodded. That was enough. When we stood to leave, she hesitated again. This time I stepped forward and gave her a brief hug. Not long, not dramatic. Just real. After she left, I sat back down for a minute and finished my coffee. I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I didn't feel like I'd lost everything either. What I felt was something in between. Balance, maybe. Or just clarity. I drove back toward the lake with the windows down, letting the air move through the truck. The road stretched out ahead, open and familiar. For the first time in a long while, it felt like it belonged to me again. I didn't lose my daughter. I just stopped supporting a version of her that didn't respect me. If you've ever felt pushed aside by your own family, you know how quiet that kind of hurt can be. It doesn't shout, it just settles in. Sometimes the only way forward isn't to fight louder. It's to step back and finally stand on your own side.